There are certain images the world has become completely used to when it comes to Taylor Swift. The sold-out stadium, the glittering stage, the perfectly timed performance, the carefully constructed music video, the headlines, the awards, the record-breaking numbers, the moments when millions of people are watching her at once. But then there is another Taylor. The Taylor who gets caught laughing at herself. The Taylor who can turn an ordinary interview question into a comedy routine. The Taylor who gets distracted by her cats. The Taylor who openly admits that sometimes she would rather stay home, lie on the couch, watch television, and do absolutely nothing. The Taylor who can be wildly confident one second and completely chaotic the next. And honestly, that might be one of the reasons fans have stayed so connected to her for so long. Because behind the superstar, there is still this surprisingly goofy, self-aware, occasionally awkward person who seems perfectly willing to make herself the joke. And when you put some of those moments together, you get a side of Taylor Swift that doesn't feel like the untouchable global superstar. It feels like Taylor, the person, the comedian, the friend, the cat mom, the songwriter who can make a joke about her own dating history, the performer who can walk into an awards show surrounded by some of the most famous people on earth and still admit that she is overwhelmed by all the famous people. And that is exactly what makes this collection of moments so entertaining. Because Taylor's public image has changed dramatically over the years. She has gone from country newcomer to pop superstar, from teenage songwriter to one of the most recognizable artists in the world. But somehow, through all those eras, one thing keeps showing up. Her ability to laugh. Sometimes at the situation. Sometimes at herself. And sometimes at absolutely everything around her. So today on Taylor Timeline, we're going back through some of those unforgettable moments. The funny answers, the awkward exchanges, the brutally honest confessions, the cat interruptions, the relationship jokes, and the completely unexpected Taylor moments that remind us why millions of fans don't just listen to her music. They feel like they know the person behind it. And some of these moments are so Taylor that you almost can't believe they happened. Let's start with one of the biggest recurring themes in Taylor's interviews, her ability to take a simple question and somehow turn it into something nobody expected. One of the most revealing things about Taylor Swift is that she can be extremely playful when someone gives her an opening. At one point, she was asked what question she would actually like to be asked on tour. It sounds simple, maybe even a little predictable. Most celebrities would probably give a thoughtful answer. Taylor, not exactly. Instead, she essentially pushed the responsibility right back to the interviewer. Don't make me do your job for you. And there it was. That dry, perfectly timed Taylor humor. It is not loud. It is not forced. She doesn't need to perform a comedy routine. Sometimes all it takes is one sentence delivered at exactly the right moment. And that has become one of her most recognizable qualities in interviews. Taylor knows how to play with the format. She knows when a question is leading somewhere. She knows when to exaggerate. And she knows when a sarcastic answer is going to land harder than a serious one. That sense of humor has helped her survive something that very few people experience at her level. Years and years of being interviewed. Think about how repetitive celebrity interviews can become. The same questions. The same topics, the same career milestones, the same relationship questions, the same questions about albums, awards, songwriting, fame, and personal life. Yet Taylor has repeatedly found ways to make those conversations feel different. Sometimes because she is genuinely funny, sometimes because she is unexpectedly blunt, and sometimes because she simply refuses to give the obvious answer. That ability to control the energy of an interview is part of what makes her so compelling. But her funniest moments often happen when another person brings up something personal. Especially when that person is Travis Kelce. There is a completely different kind of energy when Taylor's relationship with Travis Kelce becomes part of the conversation. And one clip in particular captures that perfectly. The subject turns toward a wedding. And suddenly the conversation becomes much more playful. The interviewer jokes about whether Travis might sing. Taylor responds in a way that suggests it would be difficult to stop him once he sees her at their wedding. And then comes the moment that sends the conversation in an entirely different direction. Someone asks, essentially, whether they're actually going to be there. Taylor's answer? Obviously. Then comes another joke, people don't think that we're actually friends. It is funny because the line works on several levels. Taylor Swift and Travis Kelce are not exactly living an ordinary relationship. When two extremely famous people are connected, every appearance can become a headline. Every photograph can become a discussion. Every gesture can be analyzed. Every joke can be dissected. And yet, when Taylor is allowed to talk about the relationship in a relaxed environment, the tone can be dramatically different. Instead of the enormous celebrity spectacle, you get jokes. You get teasing. You get the feeling of two people who are comfortable enough to laugh about the attention surrounding them. And that may be one of the most interesting parts. Because celebrity relationships are often presented to the public through photographs and headlines. But humor can reveal something different. Not necessarily private thoughts. Not necessarily confirmation of everything fans speculate about. Just chemistry. Ease. The ability to joke. And in Taylor's case, that ability to laugh about the situation can be incredibly revealing. Especially because she has spent so much of her life being scrutinized. She knows that people are watching. She knows that people are analyzing. And sometimes the best response is simply to make a joke. But the Travis-related humor doesn't stop there. At another point, Taylor is reminded of a lyric about wanting a best friend who is hot. And the obvious question follows, has she achieved that now? Her response is immediate. 100%. Then she looks at what she has and essentially celebrates the situation. It is playful, confident, and completely different from the Taylor Swift people might have seen earlier in her career. There is something almost refreshing about seeing Taylor openly joke about being happy. For years, so much of the public conversation surrounding her relationships focused on heartbreak. Breakups. Rumors. Songs. Exes. Speculation about who inspired what. But eventually, the conversation began to change. And moments like this show Taylor being able to laugh about romance instead of constantly defending herself from it. That shift matters. Because Taylor's story isn't only about the people who broke her heart. It is also about what happened after she grew beyond those chapters. And sometimes the easiest way to show that growth is through a joke. If there is one subject Taylor Swift can somehow make funny without even trying, it's her cats. Meredith, Olivia, and, of course, the larger-than-life reputation that Taylor has built as a devoted cat owner. At one point, Taylor is talking about going home. The interviewer suggests that most people might go home, sit on the couch, and watch television to relax. Taylor's response is essentially, yes, absolutely. She talks about lying around, watching television, just completely rotting. And honestly, that might be one of the most relatable things a global superstar has ever admitted. Because behind the stadiums and private jets and award shows is a person who apparently enjoys doing what millions of people do after a long day. Nothing. Just television. Just the couch. Just existing. And then, naturally, the cats become part of the story. Taylor introduces Meredith and Olivia. And immediately the dynamic changes. She is no longer talking like an international superstar. She's talking like someone who has spent years negotiating with two cats who clearly do not care about fame. Taylor jokes with them. She tries to explain that she feeds them every day. And the cats, naturally, appear completely unimpressed. That's the thing about cats. You can be Taylor Swift. You can sell millions of records. You can headline the biggest stadium tour in the world. You can have fans screaming your name in countries across the planet. But none of that guarantees respect from a cat. And Taylor knows it. That is what makes these moments so charming. Her humor becomes much more casual. There is no giant stage. No choreography. No production. Just Taylor, her pets, and the strange reality of being a person whose cats apparently believe they are the ones in charge. She even jokes that this is why she likes cats. Because nobody listens to her. And honestly, that's a line that perfectly captures the relationship many cat owners understand. You can provide the food. You can provide the shelter. You can provide the affection. But the cat is still going to behave like you're lucky to be allowed into the room. And Taylor seems to embrace that chaos. Which is probably part of why fans love seeing these little domestic moments. They make the superstar feel human. One of the most interesting themes running through these clips is how often Taylor reveals that she actually likes ordinary life. There is a tendency to imagine celebrities at Taylor's level as constantly surrounded by excitement. Events, parties, people, travel, cameras, performances. But Taylor has repeatedly talked about enjoying quieter moments. In one exchange, she talks about how she spends time watching television. In another, she talks about going downstairs in the middle of the night when she can't sleep and rummaging through the kitchen. And her description is hilarious. She compares herself to something like a raccoon in a dumpster. That image is almost impossible to forget. Because again, this is Taylor Swift, a woman whose every public appearance can become international news. And yet, at 3 in the morning, the problem isn't world domination. It's finding something to eat. That contrast is what makes her funny. Her life can be unbelievably extraordinary, but the little problems are still incredibly ordinary. Can't sleep? Go downstairs. Look through the kitchen. Find food. Try not to fall over. That's it. And then there are moments when she is simply trying not to fall down a staircase while wearing an elaborate outfit. She describes the fear of tripping and rolling all the way down. It's a very specific kind of celebrity problem. The dress looks incredible. The event looks glamorous. The cameras are everywhere. But somewhere inside Taylor's head is another thought: please don't fall. And if you've ever watched a celebrity walking downstairs in a dramatic outfit while trying to maintain composure, you know exactly what she means. Those are the moments that remind viewers that fame doesn't eliminate awkwardness. It just gives awkwardness a much larger audience. Another reason Taylor's interviews can be so entertaining is that she is often willing to make herself the punchline. Take her jokes about songwriting. She's asked about songs she wishes she had written. And instead of choosing some grand, deeply artistic answer, she jokes about wanting to have written the Friends theme song. Why? The royalties. It's such a simple joke. But it works because it is completely self-aware. She knows what people expect her to say. They might expect a sophisticated answer about another legendary songwriter. Instead, she chooses money. Well, specifically, the money attached to one of television's most recognizable songs. That kind of humor appears repeatedly in Taylor's interviews. She knows when to take something seriously. But she also knows when seriousness would make the moment less fun. And then there are her jokes about songwriting itself. At one point, she jokes about writing songs about people who cheat on her. She jokes about putting their names into songs so they would be embarrassed to go in public. But then she stops herself. Because she's doing a monologue. It's classic Taylor. The joke works because everyone already understands the mythology surrounding her songwriting. For years, people have tried to decode her lyrics. Fans have built entire theories around who inspired certain songs. And Taylor has sometimes played with that public fascination. Instead of fighting it every second, she can turn it into comedy. That's a powerful skill. Because when the public has already created a story around you, sometimes the best way to regain control is to laugh at the story yourself. And Taylor has become very good at doing that. Some of Taylor's funniest lines become more meaningful when you understand the context behind them. At one point, while discussing a monologue, Taylor jokes about an ex who broke up with her over the phone. She makes it clear she is not going to mention him. Then, of course, she mentions him. It's the kind of contradiction that makes the joke work. I'm not going to talk about this person. And then immediately, here's the joke. For years, Taylor's romantic history has been treated as a major part of her public identity. Every relationship could become a headline. Every breakup could become speculation. Every new song could become a detective case. But there is something different about hearing Taylor make jokes about those old chapters herself. It suggests distance. Not necessarily that every painful experience became meaningless. Not that every old relationship was easy. But that she can eventually look backward and find humor where there was once pain. That is a very human form of growth. And it appears in another recurring theme of Taylor's comedy. She knows exactly what people expect her to say. Then she gives them something else. At one point, the conversation turns toward whether Taylor might leave an awards event with a man. Her response is blunt: "No men allowed." Then she adds the punchline: Men get me in trouble. It's funny, but it also plays into one of the biggest recurring themes of Taylor's public life. Relationships have always been part of the conversation around her. For years, the public often seemed more interested in who Taylor was dating than what she was creating. And that could become exhausting. So when Taylor turns that entire conversation into a joke, there is a certain freedom to it. She's taking a subject that has historically been used to define her and reducing it to one funny sentence. But there is another side to this. Taylor also jokes about simply going home to her cats. And that might be the real punchline. The idea that after one of the biggest nights in entertainment, Taylor Swift's ideal ending could be friends, cats, home. No drama. No headlines. Just peace. Of course, celebrity life rarely works that way. But the joke is relatable. And maybe that's the point. One of the funniest moments in the collection comes from an awards show setting. Taylor talks about attending the Grammys and feeling overwhelmed because there are so many famous people around her. Think about that for a second. Taylor Swift walks into the Grammys. Taylor Swift. And she's looking around thinking, there are so many famous people here. That's the kind of sentence that only makes sense when someone has reached an extraordinary level of fame. But it also reveals something interesting about how Taylor sees herself. Even after years of success, she can still recognize the absurdity of being in a room filled with famous people. And perhaps that is part of why fans respond to her. She doesn't always behave as though she believes she's the most important person in the room. Sometimes she seems just as fascinated by everyone else. That same self-awareness appears when she is asked what advice she would give someone who wants to become a singer. Her answer starts with, "Get a good lawyer." Then she turns toward her band and basically gives them credit. It's funny, but underneath the joke is something very real. The music business isn't only about talent. There are contracts, business decisions, rights, management, legal protection. And Taylor has learned a tremendous amount about that world over the course of her career. So even when she's joking, there can be a layer of experience underneath the punchline. Not every funny Taylor moment comes from a perfectly crafted joke. Sometimes the funniest moments happen because something simply goes wrong. A question gets misunderstood. Someone miscalculates. A game gets chaotic. A prop doesn't behave. Someone sneezes. Someone falls asleep while eating. Or Taylor gets caught in a situation she clearly wasn't expecting. And those moments are often more memorable than the polished ones. Because Taylor is not trying to look perfect. She's simply reacting. At one point, there is a silly math question. The answer gets complicated. Someone gives the wrong answer. A calculator gets involved. And suddenly a simple question becomes an entire comedy segment. Then there are physical comedy moments. A game involving an egg. A competition. Someone claims it isn't fair. The energy becomes increasingly ridiculous. And Taylor goes along with it. That's important. Because one of the most underrated parts of Taylor's public personality is how willing she is to participate in nonsense. She doesn't always need the conversation to be sophisticated. Sometimes she is perfectly happy to play a ridiculous game. Sometimes she's willing to look silly. Sometimes she's willing to lose. And sometimes she is willing to argue that the rules are unfair. That willingness makes the footage feel spontaneous. Then there is one of the most perfectly tailored details in the entire collection. An award. A major award. A trophy that represents achievement. Something that, for many artists, might be displayed in a dramatic place. Taylor puts one in her kitchen. And every morning, she wakes up and sees it. But instead of treating it like a glamorous monument to her success, she jokes that it is basically giving her the middle finger. A trophy staring at her like, "Good morning. Remember who you are." It's hilarious. But there's something deeper hiding inside that joke. Taylor has spent years collecting awards. But awards don't automatically create artistic satisfaction. They don't replace songwriting. They don't replace connection with an audience. And they certainly don't make the work easier. If anything, success can create an entirely different kind of pressure. So the idea of placing an award in the kitchen, somewhere incredibly ordinary, almost feels like a way of shrinking it back down to size. It's not sacred. It's part of her life. It's sitting there while she gets coffee. And perhaps that is a useful perspective for someone who has spent so much time being celebrated. The trophy is impressive. But then you still have to wake up the next morning and make breakfast. Underneath all the comedy, there is another side to Taylor that becomes visible whenever she talks about songwriting. She has said that she doesn't believe art and suffering have to hold hands all the time. That idea is significant. For years, there has been a popular assumption that Taylor's greatest songs must come from heartbreak, pain, loss, anger, regret. But Taylor has pushed back against the idea that suffering is the only source of creativity. You can write about difficult experiences. You can write about grief. You can write about shame. You can write about self-loathing. You can write about heartbreak. But you can also create from happiness, friendship, love, confidence, growth. And that evolution matters. Because Taylor's career has never stayed frozen in one emotional state. Her music has changed as she has changed. And perhaps that is why the lighter moments in these interviews matter. They show an artist who isn't only interested in being the tragic songwriter. She's also someone who can be ridiculous. Someone who can laugh. Someone who can enjoy television. Someone who can talk about cats. Someone who can joke about romance. Someone who can walk into an awards show and admit she's overwhelmed. And someone who can say, in effect, life doesn't have to hurt for art to matter. Of course, there is another Taylor phrase that has become almost inseparable from her career: shake it off. In one of these moments, she even jokes about the title of the song and imagines a much more extreme alternative. A hardcore Ninja Jedi version. It's ridiculous. Which is precisely why it works. Because Shake It Off became one of the biggest songs of Taylor's career. It became an anthem. A cultural phrase. A song about refusing to let criticism or negativity control you. But behind the polished final product was still a songwriter capable of making jokes about how absurdly dramatic the title could have become. That is the difference between the final product and the person behind it. The public sees the finished song. Fans see the performance. But interviews sometimes reveal the weird little ideas and jokes that exist behind the scenes. And those moments are valuable because they remind us that even the biggest pop songs can begin with something playful. A strange thought. A silly phrase. A joke. Then suddenly it becomes part of music history. Maybe that's the biggest takeaway from all of these clips. Taylor Swift's appeal isn't only about perfection. In fact, some of her most memorable moments come from imperfection. The stumble. The awkward answer. The sarcastic comment. The cat interruption. The wrong math answer. The ridiculous game. The unexpected joke. The moment she doesn't know what to say. The moment she says too much. The moment she realizes she said too much. The moment she laughs. Those moments create connection. Because fans don't need Taylor to be perfect every second. They want to see the person. And that's something Taylor has increasingly allowed audiences to see throughout her career. Not everything. Not her private life. Not her innermost thoughts. But pieces. Small windows. Little moments that show personality. And those moments become especially powerful when contrasted with the enormous scale of her career. Because this is a woman who can walk into a stadium and perform for tens of thousands of people. Yet she can also sit in a room and complain that her cats don't listen to her. She can headline one of the biggest tours in music history and still joke about lying on the couch watching TV. She can have millions of people analyzing her relationships and still laugh about the idea that men get her into trouble. She can stand on a stage covered in lights and still worry about falling down the stairs. That contrast is what makes her feel real. It's easy to focus on Taylor Swift's biggest moments. The records. The awards. The albums. The tours. The stadiums. The cultural impact. But a career is not built only from giant moments. It is also built from thousands of small interactions. An interview. A joke. A conversation. A silly game. A backstage moment. A reaction. A laugh. A mistake. A sentence that fans remember years later. Those are the moments that create familiarity. And familiarity is part of what makes fandom so powerful. Swifties don't simply know the songs. They know the eras. They know the references. They recognize the jokes. They remember old interviews. They notice when Taylor repeats an idea from years earlier. They understand the evolution. And that creates something bigger than celebrity. It creates continuity. Taylor changes. Her music changes. Her relationships change. Her appearance changes. Her career changes. But the person who loves cats, jokes about television, laughs at herself, and occasionally says something completely unexpected can still appear through all those different eras. That's the Taylor fans recognize. And perhaps that is why compilations of her funniest moments never really get old. Because even when you've heard the joke before, you're watching the person deliver it. And Taylor's personality is often the real entertainment. Taylor's career has lasted long enough that many fans have essentially grown up alongside her. Some discovered her when she was the teenage girl with a guitar. Some joined during the pop transformation. Some became fans during the 1989 era. Some found her through Reputation. Some through Lover. Some through Folklore and Evermore. Some through Midnights. Some discovered her through the Eras Tour. And some became fans because of a single song that happened to find them at exactly the right moment. But regardless of when someone joined the journey, there is a common thread. Taylor has always been remarkably willing to put pieces of herself into the work. And sometimes, those pieces are serious. Sometimes they're heartbreaking. Sometimes they're deeply personal. And sometimes they're absolutely ridiculous. That last category deserves more attention. Because humor can be revealing. The way someone jokes can tell you how comfortable they are. How self-aware they are. How willing they are to laugh at themselves. And Taylor's humor has evolved alongside her. The jokes about exes became more self-aware. The jokes about fame became more confident. The jokes about relationships became more playful. The jokes about her cats became almost legendary. And the ordinary moments became reminders that behind the celebrity machine is still a human being. The Travis Kelce references in these clips add another fascinating layer. Because Taylor's public life has entered a period where romance isn't always framed through heartbreak. There is a lighter quality to the conversation. More joking. More teasing. More public comfort. When someone asks whether Travis is the hot best friend she once joked about wanting, Taylor's answer is immediate. 100%. That one exchange says a lot about the difference between the way Taylor sometimes talks about relationships now and the way relationships were discussed earlier in her career. At the end of the day, these clips aren't really about Taylor Swift being funny. They're about something bigger. They're about the power of allowing yourself to be human in public. Taylor has spent years under a level of scrutiny most people could never imagine. She has had her relationships analyzed, her lyrics dissected, her clothes discussed, her friendships examined, her career debated, her every move photographed. And yet, through all of it, she has continued to find room for humor. She laughs. She jokes. She teases. She makes herself the punchline. And sometimes she simply lets the moment become chaotic. That doesn't erase the serious parts of her story. It adds another dimension to them. Because a person can be ambitious and silly, successful and insecure, powerful and awkward, private and playful, a global superstar and someone who spends the night eating whatever is in the kitchen like a raccoon. All of those things can exist at the same time. And perhaps that is the Taylor Swift fans keep coming back to. Not just the woman on the stage. Not just the voice behind the songs. Not just the record-breaking superstar. But the person who can still laugh. The person who can still be surprised. The person who can still make a ridiculous joke. The person who can still sit around talking about cats. The person who can still turn an ordinary interview into a moment fans remember years later. Because when the cameras disappear and the lights go down, fame is still just one part of the story. The rest is personality. And Taylor has given fans plenty of that. So whether you've been following Taylor since the beginning, discovered her during one of her more recent eras, or simply enjoy watching the most famous person in the room completely lose it over a ridiculous question, these moments are a reminder that sometimes the best Taylor Swift stories aren't the ones that make the biggest headlines. They're the ones that make you laugh. They're the ones that make you say, "That is so Taylor." And they're the moments that remind us why, after all these years and all these eras, fans are still watching, still listening, still laughing, still wondering what Taylor will do next. And here at Taylor Timeline, that's exactly what we'll keep following. Not just the giant headlines, but the little moments that reveal the personality behind them. Because Taylor's story has never been just one story. It's a timeline. An entire collection of eras, decisions, relationships, songs, memories, surprises, and moments that continue to unfold. And if you've been here for the journey, then you already know, the next chapter is always worth watching.